anywhere, you don't see that. In the last 8 years, Texas has gone from being 8th place in the Pacific Research Institute's best places to do business down to 31st. We've fallen 24 places. And I think that what we need to do is reinvigorate some of our economic freedom. We need to drastically reduce the size of government. Look, I think this is radical ideas. Freedom is a radical idea. And significantly reducing the size of the Texas government is an absolutely radical idea. But I believe governments need to live within their means. And like the old country song says, if 10% is good enough for Jesus, it ought to be enough for Uncle Sam and the great state of Texas. So what I propose is eliminating all other taxes and just looking at a consumption tax of 10% that the state must live within. It's not a question of all these great programs that people want to do. Those should be left to charities like the Samaritan Inn and others and church organizations. I just don't think government does this best. Remember, government, even at its best, is a necessary evil. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed Kless and Florence Shapiro. So we're going to now take questions from the audience. We've got 2 wireless mics. I guess I'm going to take the left, unfortunately. David will take the right, and we can begin with your side.
Andy, you're on our right. So.
Thank you.
And just one more time to restate the ground rules. 60 seconds or less for the questions, and 2 minutes or less for the answers, please.
And the candidates could come up by their microphones.
Yes, please.
Okay, this is real simple. How should the State Board of Education boundaries be redrawn and redistricted?
Well, that's a good question. You know, we are sitting with only, trying to remember the number of state board members, but I think it's about 18 or 20, and we've got a state of 25 million people. So, pardon me?
There's
15, I'm sorry, 15, I thought it was 20. And so we've got a state of 25 million people. It's very difficult to do those more compact, but I will tell you that Senate District 8, which is the district that we're in, has a representative, and has had a representative, who has lived in College Station, and it's Bryan, and it's very far away. And the communities of interest with the Collin County fast growth community and the interest that's going on down in Bryan College Station are vastly different. So that is absolutely unacceptable. And I think what we're going to see is trying to get more communities of interest in the State Board of Education. It's a tough thing to do, but we can do it.
I would just say fairly. That's how they should be. Fairly.
Well, it's actually fair and legal. Those are the 2 words.
And I need to make one more amendment to the rules here. We're going to alternate from the left and right of the audience, and questioners, you can direct it to either candidate. If you don't, we'll assume it's for both candidates, but that's how we'll continue with this. So Andy, you got someone on your side?
I do.
Yeah, hi. I'm John Barber, live in Parker. Mr. Shapiro, you said that you could postulate a constitutional amendment to make some repairs. What other constitutional amendments can you postulate? Could you think of one, for instance, for term limits? Would you go for something like that?
Sure.
What other ones? And sir, that's what ones would you postulate? Mr. Shapiro, could you?
You want me to go first?
Yeah,
Okay.
first.
Well, I think there's several that we can look at from today. I mean, we've got to take those amendments to the Constitution and follow them. The 10th Amendment, for one thing, we ought to rejuvenate the 10th Amendment. We need to make sure that people understand that those powers that are not granted specifically in the Constitution to the federal government belong to us. That's what's happening right now with our education system. They're trying to take over the Texas education system. They want common core curriculum to be sent from on high, from Washington, D.C., to tell Texas what to teach their students. It's preposterous. I told them the day that one of their bureaucrats in Washington knows what's going on in the McKinney Independent School District in the classroom of Mrs. Smith, then I'll let them have control over our state. It's impossible right now. And they've got to recognize that this has got to change. We're not going to sit back and watch it happen. That's one thing. The EPA is another thing. The unemployment compensation. I mean, you name it. We have gotten into a fix because the federal government has decided to run the state, and it's unacceptable.
Thank you.
Okay, I interpreted your question as the Texas Constitution and but you're talking about the U.S. Constitution. I would add one word to the First Amendment, which is the word economics. We need a separation of economics and state, and that's what's needed. And that would have a dramatic impact on everything that has flowed from Washington, because they could no longer be regulating all of these other things. It would be a strengthening of the Interstate Commerce Clause, which has been completely misinterpreted throughout the years. The regulation, that's Article 1, Section 8, talks about making regular commerce. That means making it fair and no tariffs between states. Well, that's what's been used to justify Obamacare, as well, what will be used to justify Obamacare and everything else that has come down from most of the states. And I think at a state level, what the senator and myself need to do is we need to use tools such as nullification and interposition to potentially block these things from happening in the state of Texas. We have some of the tools available to us, and we just won't know until we test them out in courts.
We have a question over here.
Yes, are you opposed to Obama's Race to the Top school program?
Yes, sir.
And if so, why?
Yes, sir, I am. It's got strings attached to it you wouldn't believe. If we sit back and just let Washington run our schools, we are foolish. We know best what our students need locally. Local control is a #1 issue in my opinion. And what Obama has done with Arnie Duncan's help, who's the education czar, it's not a czar, commissioner of education, is to put strings attached to what that money is. And we were the only state, along with Alaska, that said, no thanks, we don't want your money. And I'll give you a little side note to that, which is really interesting. I was at a national conference on education, and I was sitting there with a bunch of people who were asking me why we didn't take the money, why we didn't want the money. And I said, we don't want the strings attached to it. And period. And they said, we've been thinking maybe we shouldn't have been looking at it either. So there's a lot of buyer's remorse going on right now.
I would go one step farther, and that is to say, well, why haven't we rejected No Child Left Behind too? Because that was the first intrusion of the feds into our classroom in the States, and we need to stop it back then. We've allowed these in certain aspects to come into the classroom when there's a Republican in office, but when there's a Democrat in office, now we throw up our flags and say, hey, listen, maybe we ought to look at this differerly. You can make arguments again. I'm not disputing, once again, the intent of these laws. It's just that they get in the way, and once they take an inch, they take a mile. And so I believe the beginnings of Obama's education program have its roots in George Bush's No Child Left Behind.
Right here. I guess this is for Senator Shapiro. If you ask the Washington politicians what's the matter with Afghanistan, they all say if they need to inject the rule of law and then everything will be great there. Well, those same politicians in Washington, they've abandoned the United States Constitution, and that's the highest law in the land, so they've abandoned the rule of law in our own country, and they may be well to take their own advice. John Locke said that wherever law ends, tyranny begins. So would you be willing to do nullification and sovereignty resolutions to protect the Texans?
Yes, of course.
I already made my question clear, so yes, I agree.
Okay, Charlie. Right. Okay, my question is for Ed, and I'd also like for the senator to comment on it also. Under your issue, Ed, one of your issues, Ed, was war on drugs. It says unwinnable personal responsibility should control. I don't think people have that kind of responsibility.